In this video, I'm going to share 3 of the most common approaches to team building in the workplace, and we'll explore why all that time, money, and effort is usually counterproductive. Finally, I'll reveal what does actually work to create a more motivated, content, and cooperative team with a lot less time, money, and effort. I'm Jeff Mowatt. For over 30 years, managers have brought me in to work with their teams on how to create outstanding service. I remember one particular manager who was bringing me in, and he said, Jeff, I can accept when a team member makes a mistake. What drives me crazy is when employees don't play well with one another. He said when mistakes happen, employees do more covering their backsides or blaming one another than actually doing what needs to be done, working together to take care of the customer. We need a bigger commitment to teamwork. And maybe that's true for your team. Before you spend a lot of time, money, and effort on team building, let's look at the 3 most common approaches to team building and explore why they don't seem to work. Be sure to stay with this video right until the end, because at that point, I'm going to share what does work to create a more motivated, content, and cooperative team. As I'm sharing these tips, think about what's worked within your organization to build more cooperative teams. And please go ahead and share them in the comments below. While you're at it, for more of these tips, be sure to like and subscribe below. Team building mistake number 1 is what I call party time. And the idea is that once or twice a year, you get all the employees together and you have maybe a company picnic in the summer, or in December, you might have a holiday meal that you get together and break bread, and that's going to make everyone feel better about one another and be a team builder. Well, it might be a good thing if you are a extrovert and hey, you love to get there, let's have a party, yahoo, woohoo, woo. The thing is, if you were to ask how many of your employees consider themselves to be extroverts, even the ones that are pretty popular, I think you're going to be surprised that many people, despite the fact that they know how to work a room, so to speak, and get along with folks, would describe themselves as being introverts. And the idea of going to a social event and bringing along perhaps their spouse or sweethearts to this family event is like drawing, the fingernails across a chalkboard, that actually, this is going to be more of a pain for most people for several reasons. First of all, you're getting together and people who are having a meal, how are you going to arrange the meal seating plan? Do the popular people sit together? This is like going back to high school, going, I'm not well respected, I'm not well liked, and look at the fancy people, the managers are over there. So you can get into all that sort of status thing around who's going to sit with whom. And then, of course, you might have at a fancy meal, you might have wine or alcohol served. And when people are sometimes, because they're slightly nervous about interacting with people they're not used to interacting with, they might overindulge, so to speak. And then we can have lots of challenges around that, let alone the fact that people might do or say things that are inappropriate, but they also might do things, if there is any flirtation that were happening under the surface at work, they may take that to above the surface, and you might end up with some sort of a sexual discrimination lawsuit going on because it is a company event. Now, add to that the cost of these events. Imagine when you put on a dinner in December at a local restaurant or hotel, which is the busiest time of year for them. Hence, you're going to pay a premium price, so it's not going to be cheap. And of course, if we're smart, we're going to arrange for transportation. We don't want people taking their company vehicles, if there is such, to one of these events if there's drinking involved. So you're going to be paying a lot of money for transportation, meals, and so on. And sometimes they might be flying in some hotel accommodations. It's a lot of money that is spent for what I believe is not a lot of team building per se. So I think we need to recognize that meals are not team building events. In fact, for those folks who are a little more reserved and don't necessarily want to get to know everybody as family, they're just working together, they're colleagues, but they're not necessarily best friends, I would encourage you to give them an option. Okay, so I tell you what, folks, if we're going to have a meal together, and we got a couple choices, we can have either one in the summer or and a fancy sit-down meal in December, or once a month we'll bring in pizza on a Friday. There won't be any booze, but it's on us. I guarantee you that pizza's going to win every time, and you're going to save a bunch of money, a whole bunch of liabilities, exposing ourselves to possible lawsuits if people do and say things that are inappropriate. So the bottom line when it comes to party time is that I believe that meals should be considered the perks that they are, but they're not team builders. Quick reminder that if you're finding these tips so far to be helpful, then please remember to like and subscribe for more of these videos. Okay, team building mistake number 2 is what I call obstacle courses. The idea is that you take them to a high ropes course, or maybe to a paintball place, or maybe you do a fire walk. And the principle is that you're going to have all of your team members that are going to overcome this obstacle, and there are going to be all sorts of lessons around team building and approaches to overcoming obstacles that they're going to derive from that. That's the theory. And in fact, theoretically, there can be some lessons learned, but the big proviso is this. It's providing you have a skilled facilitator, professional facilitator. I'm not talking about a skilled climber in high ropes or a skilled paintball shooter. I'm talking about a professional facilitator who understands how to derive the lessons from this. One example that comes to my mind of this type of team building approach that really works, it's called the Pit Crew Challenge. And it's put on by a colleague and friend of mine, Bob Parker. He's based out of London, Ontario, where he brings in a NASCAR, and the members of the employees are put into teams, and they are walked through the process of how to do a quick tire change, that type of thing, as a team. And he does it in a way that's incredibly safely done. One doesn't have to be athletic. And he is a professional, skilled facilitator. He's not, frankly, a NASCAR fan, but he understands how to derive the lessons around group dynamics that lasts a long time. So there are some possible positives to this. However, let's consider the negatives for a lot of these unprofessionally done, quote unquote, team building physical activities. There's a lot of folks who, first of all, they haven't trained for this event. If you're doing a high ropes course and you've never done it, there's a high risk of injury. Plus, you have a lot of people who are shy, perhaps, or a little bit timid, or they're embarrassed about not being athletically gifted. So there's a possibility of humiliating a lot of your team members inadvertently. And yeah, sure, the jocks do well with this, but is that what we're trying to achieve? And the biggest question that I have is, what does walking across hot coals have to do with sales blaming service department when a customer's upset? Unless you actually walk on hot coals for a living, there's almost no relevance to this. And what we are doing, though, is we're subjecting ourselves to a lot of liability in terms of possible injury and workers' compensation claims, and a lot of possible humiliating of employees. So yeah, obstacle courses, I'm just going to say up front, probably a bad idea for team building. It has very little to do with team building. If it's a perk and people want to do it on their own and sign waivers on their own, this is not a company event. Hey, that's up to them. That's great. But these things aren't about team building. There's something else. And maybe it's a perk. Team building mistake number 3 is what I call focusing on the symptoms of a lack of teamwork, but not the underlying problems. And the symptoms of a lack of teamwork may be that there's been a problem in terms of quality or safety or customer experience. And so what happens is typically the manager gets together and talks about with all the team members, we've got to work together. We've got to start pulling together. These mistakes are happening up there. And the idea is that we kind of motivate the team to rally together. Well, motivational speeches have limited impact. And I'm saying this because I'm often described as a motivational speaker. My response to that is, hey, I have a hard enough time motivating myself before I can motivate someone else. The problem with a lack of teamwork is not usually that people just aren't motivated to work together. The bigger problem is the systems that are set up that may motivate people to not work together. For example, they may be rewarded based on the speed that they work and the quantity that they produce. And that's the way they're compensated, or that's the way they're measured. Well, if it's all about speed and quantity as opposed to quality, well, then we're going to have some problems in overall outcomes. And that's nothing to do with teamwork. It has everything to do with the way that people are recognized and rewarded. Now, at the same time, I do know that there are some folks who may be exhibiting a lack of teamwork that manifests itself in terms of like bullying behaviors or statements that are racist or misogynist, or non-inclusive. And in those cases, first of all, we should just have a conversation with that one individual as opposed to lecturing everyone on this. I always find that managers who blame the whole team are abdicating the responsibility because they're not focusing on the underlying problem or individual. Now, if it does seem to be a culture within the organization where it's been acceptable to be less than inclusive, well, then it may in fact be time for some training on inclusivity. And if that's the case within your organization, one person who I have often recommended is Stephen Hammond. And he's based out of Victoria, British Columbia. Stephen Hammond. We'll put his name right there, and go ahead and contact him, because he has a wonderful way of helping people understand that what they thought was acceptable in the past, certainly in today's, I would call it hypersensitive workplace, is no longer holding sway. And so, yes, there is some real value in treating those types of inappropriate behaviors. However, there is something much larger that we need to look at when we're addressing a lack of teamwork. And that's what we're going to talk about next. Just a quick reminder that if you like this video, I think you're going to love my ongoing tips. You'll find them for free at jeffsbusinesstips.com. Okay, so now that we looked at 3 of the most common team building approaches and why they don't work, let's consider what does work to create a more cohesive team. In terms of exploring this, think about the teamwork that happens on a professional sports team. Let's take a men's hockey team. You have a whole bunch of athletes who are they've been gifted athletically since childhood. They are highly paid. And my guess is these young men are also have pretty healthy egos out there. In fact, to the degree that when they are facing an opposing team, the opposing team member might make an offhand comment. Well, fisticuffs arise because of that. And yet, when they're on the same team, all of these young athletes know that their common goal is to win games. And it's got nothing to do with them talking about, gosh, we've got to get along better. They all know they need to get along better. They all know that they need to win games. So what we find is that teamwork does not happen because we focus on teamwork. It's kind of like trying to fall asleep. You probably had this happen where at night you're having a hard time falling asleep and go, I got to fall asleep. Yeah, I've got to get up for work in the morning. And we worry about we're not falling asleep, and that gets more upsetting. And so we get more worked up and we don't fall asleep. Or we take a completely different approach. And what we do is maybe we exercise earlier in the day. We don't have as much caffeine. We try to take care of any problems we have. And then we actually get to bed, maybe read a little bit, take our mind off of stuff. And sleep becomes the byproduct of doing all of those things. Similarly, teamwork does not happen because we talk about let's have teamwork. Teamwork happens when we have a common goal, just like the hockey players have a common goal. And the ultimate common goal is let's help create a better customer experience. And I'm talking about internal customers with employees working with one another, and external customers. And when we all focus on let's create external customer service experience, then everybody is working in the same direction. It's a little bit like, I lived down in Dallas, Texas for a while, and they have an expression down in Texas. They say that a dog on the hunt doesn't know it has fleas. You can't get this kind of information just anywhere, you realize. But the idea is that when you're so focused on a goal, you don't worry about the little stuff. Similarly, when your employees are all focused on satisfying internal, external customers, they aren't distracted by interpersonal pettiness. They all just want to make sure that customer is taken care of. So how do we do that? Well, we make sure that we have a culture that supports exceptional internal and external customer service. And so how do we achieve that? Well, I've been doing this now, as I mentioned, for over 30 years. And we started working with a lot of organizations on what were some things that we can do that motivates employees to be more customer focused. And we looked at all of the things that we can do in terms of recognizing them, training them, rewarding them, gaining customer feedback. And we turned it into a once a month, 90-minute session. I wrote a book on it called Becoming a Service Icon in 90 Minutes a Month. It became a Canadian bestseller. So I started offering this as a public workshop. And essentially, there are 5 things that you can do when you and your team members get together to talk about that big goal of taking care of internal and external customers. And the 5 elements are what we call, number 1, having a coaching moment where you share a way that they can enhance customer experience. And oftentimes it's just changing a few words around rather than somebody being upset saying, oh, calm down. Instead, we'd say, gosh, it sounds frustrating. We also want to look at our customer service standards and what our mission is. We want to look at our standards around efficiency, quality, safety, so on, but we also want to prioritize those standards so that employees are going to make better decisions on their own when you as a manager are not around. We also want to look at gathering proactively customer feedback and then talking about how do we implement that as a team, all the adjustments we need to make to create a more positive customer experience. And then finally, the 5th element is how do we reward and recognize employees, not because they've been around for a long time, but because of exceptional service that they provide. I call this service legends. And when we do this on a regular basis, which only takes about an hour and a half a month, we have exceptional enhancement in our culture. To the degree with a large organization, I worked with one large Crown corporation in Saskatchewan, and within 6 months of introducing that training program, their productivity, which they measure, they are a Crown corporation, their employee productivity increased by 34%, and the amount of complaints they received from the public, their constituency, decreased by 75%. Now, they are a large organization, but even on a smaller level with a pharmacy that we worked with, they started working with us. They attended our seminars, started using the CAST meeting process. And of the hundreds of area businesses, they were declared to be number 1 in terms of gold standard service in their region. Number 1. And all they did was they focused on introducing what I call CAST meetings, customer service team meetings. The bottom line of all of this is that we don't get more teamwork by focusing on teamwork itself. Teamwork is a byproduct. We get more of a cooperative, content, and motivated workforce by focusing on the larger goal, and that is satisfying internal and external customers in an exceptional way. So let's briefly recap. And I'd invite you to comment below about what your opinions are about those common team building approaches. The first one being party time, and let's get everybody together for a fancy meal. Or the second one being running obstacle courses. The third one being, okay, let's treat symptoms. Let's just talk about this one person about their behavior, when in fact, the reality is that it's underlying systems. And if we have a systematic way of recognizing our employees for customer service behaviors, training them on how to enhance their behaviors, training them on how to solicit customer feedback, and then talking about how to innovate and adapt according to that feedback. And then finally, recognizing employees for the exceptional service that they provide, then we're going to have a sense of teamwork that is the byproduct of all of that. I'm Jeff Mowatt. I hope you found this to be helpful. And you'll find more of these tips at jeffsbusinesstips.com. See you next time.